Primetime or peak time is the block of broadcast programming taking place during the middle of the evening for television programming. The term primetime is often defined in terms of a fixed time period, for example, from 1900 to 2200 or 2000 to 2300. Time slot's relationship to radio and television revenue. Primetime is the day part with the most viewers and is generally where television networks and local stations reap much of their advertising revenues. In recent years in the U.S., for example, advertising expenditure during primetime was highest among drama shows. The Nielsen ratings system is explicitly designed for the optimum measurement of audience viewership by day parts, with primetime being of most interest. Most people tend to watch television at primetime, as most often, based on standard working time, the end of the workday coincides with primetime viewing hours. Most viewers sit down to watch TV after dinner. This is usually the main reason for the high ratings for television programming at this time, as well as the attraction of the time slot for advertisers. The existence of primetime in the United States is largely an artifact of now repealed regulations of the Federal Communications Commission, which limited the number of hours that a network can require its affiliates to broadcast. Additionally, networks may also choose to provide local affiliates the opportunity to air sporting events or other special events which may fall outside of standard designated network broadcast times. Prime time for radio is called OE drive to me and, in Eastern and Pacific time, is 6:10 a.m. and 3:07 p.m. and, for Mountain and Central time, is 5:09 a.m. and 2:06 p.m. A survey by Nielsen revealed that viewers watched almost 2 hours worth of TV during prime time. Asia China Mainland China. In Chinese television, the 1900 to 22 o'clock time slot is known as Golden Time. The term also influenced a nickname of a strip of holidays known as Golden Week. Hong Kong and Macau, prime time here usually takes place from 2000 until 2200. After that, programs classified as OEPGA are allowed to be broadcast. Frontline dramas appear during this time slot in Cantonese, as well as movies in English. Taiwan. In Taiwan, prime time starts at 20 o'clock in the evening. Taiwanese drama series played then are called 8 o'clock series and are expected to have high viewer ratings. India. In India, prime time occurs between 2000 and 2300. The main news programs are broadcast at 20:30, and the highest-rated television program follows at 21 o'clock. Indonesia. Prime time usually takes place from 1800 to 2300 WIB, preceded by a daily newscast at 17 o'clock. After prime time, programs classified as adult are allowed to be broadcast. Like another Muslim-majority country, there is also a midnight prime time during Sahur time in the month of Ramadan. It takes place from 02:30 and ends at the Fajr prayer call, varies between 04:30 and 05:00. The time slot is usually filled with comedy and religious programming. Iraq. In Iraq, prime time runs from 2000 to 2300. The main news programs are broadcast at 20 o'clock and the highest-rated television program airs at 21 o'clock. Japan. In Japanese television, the 1900 to 22 o'clock time slot is also known as Golden Time. The term also influenced a nickname of a strip of holidays known as Golden Week. Malaysia. Malaysian prime time starts with the main news from 2000 to 20:30 and ends at 23 o'clock. Usually, programs during prime time are domestic dramas, foreign drama series, movies and entertainment programs. Programs that classify as 18 are not allowed to be broadcast before 10 p.m. but on RTM, most programs on this slot are rated U throughout the whole day. However, programs broadcast after 2300 are still considered prime time. As of December 2010, NTV7's prime time continues until 12 a.m. Programs during prime time may have longer commercial breaks due to number of viewers. Some domestic primetime productions may be affected because of certain major sporting events such as FIFA World Cup. However, only FIFA World Cup in the Americas did not affect the domestic primetime programs. Philippines in the Philippines, primetime blocks begin at 18 o'clock and run until about 23:00 on weekdays, and 20:00 to 23:00 on weekends. The weekday primetime blocks usually consist of local teleseries and foreign television series. The network's highest-rated programs are usually aired right after the evening newscast at 20 o'clock, while a foreign series usually precedes the late-night newscast. On weekends, non-scripted programming such as talent shows, reality shows and current affairs shows air in prime time. For the minor networks, prime time consists of American television series on weekdays, with encores of those shows on weekends. Prime time originally started earlier at around 19:00, but the evening newscasts would lengthen to 90 minutes and now start at 18:30, instead of the original 1-hour newscast that starts at 18 o'clock. Thailand in Thailand, primetime dramas air from 8:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Most dramas are soap operas. Primetime dramas are popular and influential to Thai society. Singapore in Singapore, primetime begins at 6:30 p.m. on MediaCorp Channel 8 and 7 p.m. on MediaCorp Channel 5, MediaCorp Channel U, Channel News Asia, MediaCorp Surya, MediaCorp Vasantham and MediaCorp Octo, which are also the main television channels in Singapore. On Channel 8, prime time ends at 12 o'clock midnight on weekdays, at 12:30 a.m. on Saturdays and at 11:30 p.m. on Sundays. On Channel 5, prime time ends at 12:30 a.m. on Sundays to Fridays and at 11:30 p.m. on Saturdays. On Surya, prime time ends at 11:30 p.m., 7 days a week. On Vasantham, prime time ends at 11:30 p.m. on Mondays to Thursdays and at 12 o'clock midnight or late on Fridays to Sundays. On Channel News Asia, prime time ends at 11:32 p.m., immediately after the headlines, 7 days a week. On Channel U, prime time ends at 11 p.m., 7 days a week, and on Octo, prime time ends when they close down at 12 o'clock midnight or late. Generally, however, prime time is considered to be from 6:30 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. South Korea in South Korea, prime time usually runs from 20:00 to 23:00 during the week, while on Saturdays and Sundays, it runs from 18:00 to 23:00. Family-oriented television shows are broadcast before 22:00, and adult-oriented television shows air after 22:00. Vietnam in Vietnam, prime time is also known as Golden Time, Tia Ng via T, Gia Va Ng. Prime time starts at 20 o'clock in the evening and ends at 23 o'clock. Europe Bosnia and Herzegovina in Bosnia and Herzegovina, prime time starts at 20 o'clock and finishes at 22 o'clock. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 19 o'clock and followed by a late-night newscast at 22 o'clock. Croatia in Croatia, prime time starts between 20:00 and 20:15. Croatian public broadcaster HRT broadcasts a daily newscast at 19 o'clock that ends at 20 o'clock. Also, many private broadcasters have daily newscasts before and after it at around 20:05. Followed by the start of prime time. Many broadcasters who do not have daily newscasts start with prime time at 20 o'clock. Prime time generally finishes between 22:00 and 23:00, followed by late-night edition of the network newscast and adult-oriented programming. Denmark in Denmark, prime time starts at 20 o'clock. Germany and Austria the oldest public national broadcasting network of Germany. Das erste airs the Tagesschau and specialty channels, Germany's most watched news broadcast, at 8 p.m. The Tagesschau is scheduled for 15 minutes. Its end marks the beginning of the prime time era since the 1950s. Most channels therefore chose to start their prime time at 8:15 p.m. In the 1990s, Sat1 failed, moving the start of prime time to 8 p.m., suffering significant loss of audience share. Finland in Finland, prime time starts at 21 o'clock. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 20:30. France In France primetime runs from 8:45 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., which usually follows the news. Greece In Greece, primetime runs from 9 p.m. to 12 a.m., which usually follows the news. Hungary In Hungary, primetime starts weekdays on the two big commercial stations at 7 p.m. with game shows, tabloid and docu-reality programs. At 9 p.m., two popular soap operas air, Baratok Kar Paragraph ZT and Jar Cubed Ban Rushban, which follows at 9:30 p.m. American and other series, movies, talk shows and magazines run until 11:30 p.m. The prime-time lineup is preceded by daily news programs at 6:30 p.m. Primetime begins at 7 p.m. on weekends with blockbuster movies and television shows. Prior to March 15, 2015, the public television station M1 started their primetime with a game show at 6:30 p.m., which was followed by daily news program Harada Cubed at 7:30 p.m. After the news, the channel began to broadcast American and other series, talk shows, magazines and news programs until 10 p.m., which was followed by daily news magazine Est and a late edition of Harada Cubed. From March 15, 2015, Duna began broadcasting all of its entertainment programming, which was transferred from M1, meaning their new start of primetime on Duna is at 6 p.m., starting with the simulcast of the 6 p.m. edition of Harada Cubed from the newly relaunched news channel, M1. Ireland RTE runs a current affairs program called a OE Prime Time Euro after the 9 p.m. news. As of 2011, it is currently hosted by Miriam O'Callaghan. Iceland In Iceland, primetime starts at 19:30. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 19 o'clock. Italy In Italy, primetime is from 9:15 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. It usually follows news and, on some networks, a slot called a OE Access Prime Time Euro. Shows, movies, and sport events are usually shown during prime time. Netherlands Much like in Germany, prime time in the Netherlands usually begins at 8:30 p.m. in order to not compete with NOS Journal's flagship 8 p.m. newscast. Norway In Norway, prime time starts at 19:45. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 19 o'clock. Poland In Poland, prime time starts around 20:00. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 19:30, the newscast is aired at 19 o'clock followed by the news magazine Nuaga at 1950-1945 and then the soap Na WSPA Cubed LNEJ at 20:05. Various, movies on Friday, show or movies at Saturday, and program or movies at Sunday, the news is aired at 18:50, followed by a sitcom SHWIAT Widu Kipskak at 19:30. Slovakia Public television in Slovakia consists of two channels. On the main channel primetime starts at 20:10, and on the second one primetime programming starts at 20 o'clock. The two biggest private broadcasters set the start of primetime programming at 2020 and 2030. Generally, however, primetime is considered to be from 20:00 to 23:00. Slovenia In Slovenia, prime time, the period in which the most watched shows are broadcast, is from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. It is preceded by daily newscasts. Dnevnik RTVSLO on TVSLO1, 24-hour on POP TV, Svitna Kanala, and Danes on Planet TV. Sweden In Sweden, prime time starts at 20 o'clock. It is preceded by a daily newscast at 19:30 and local news at 19:50. Spain In Spain, prime time refers to the time period in which the most watched shows are broadcast. Prime time in Spain starts quite late when compared to most nations as it runs from 22:30 till 01:00. Most news programs in Spain air at 21 o'clock for an hour and prime time follows. However, due to fierce competition, especially among the private stations, prime time has even been delayed until 23:00. Most channels are delaying prime time in order to protect their top shows from sporting events. In the 1990s, prime time in Spain began at 21 o'clock, moving to 21:30 in the latter half of the 1990s and 22:00 in the early 2000s. Commercial broadcaster La Sexta and the second channel from the public broadcasting La 2 have attempted to shift prime time back to 21:30 in 2006 and spring 2007, but these attempts have been unsuccessful. Fellow public channel La 1 also tried to pull prime time back to 21:00 in early 2015, to no avail. The lateness in the start of prime time in Spain is also due to Spanish culture. Spanish people generally work from 0900-1400 and then from 1700-2000 as opposed to the standard 0900-1700. The popular late-night show Cúbnicas Marcianas during the late 1990s or Euro 2000 also helped to extend prime time well into the early hours, with the show being watched by a share of 40%, despite finishing at 2 o'clock. Spain might also be unique in that it has a second prime time, running from 14:30-17:00, which coincides with the extended Spanish lunch break. Shows airing in the secondary primetime period on many occasions beat those primetime shows at night on a daily basis. The second primetime only occurs on weekdays, though, and the slot is usually filled with The Simpsons, news, soap operas and talk shows. Georgia in Georgia, primetime starts at between 18.45-20.00 and mainly ends at 00.00. However, at Friday primetime usually continues until 01.00. United Kingdom in the UK, the term used as peak time, early peak is 17:30 to 20:00 and late peak is 20:00 to 23:00. North America, in North America, television networks feed their primetime programming in two blocks, one for the Eastern, Central, and Mountain time zones, and one for the Pacific, Alaskan, and Hawaiian time zones, to their local network affiliates. In Atlantic Canada as well as Alaska and Hawaii, there is no change in the interpretation or usage of a euro or a prime to me a euro, as the concept is not attached to time zones in any way. Affiliates in the Mountain, Alaskan, and Hawaii Aleutian zones are either on their own to broadcast delay by an hour or two, or collectively form a small, regional network feed with others in the same time zone. The hours traditionally constituting prime time in North America are 8:00-11 p.m. Eastern Pacific and 7:00-10 p.m. Central Mountain on Monday or Euro Saturday, and 7:00-11 p.m. Eastern Pacific and 6:00-10 p.m. Central Mountain on Sunday. For cable networks, prime time is 8:00-11 p.m. all 7 days of the week. Some networks such as Fox, the CW, and My Network TV only broadcast from 8:00-10 p.m., a time period known as Common Prime. Since September 2009, the CW and My Network TV do not program Saturday or Sunday primetime at all, as the CW turned over its Sunday night schedule and My Network TV its Saturday night schedule over to their affiliates. Also, over the past decade, the major American networks have come to consider Saturday primetime as a graveyard slot and as such have largely abandoned scheduling of new scripted programming on that night. Although the networks still maintain a primetime programming schedule on that night, generally featuring rebroadcasts of programs aired earlier in the week, movies, non-scripted reality programs and, occasionally, remnant episodes of cancelled series, though generally live-in professional and college sporting events are now preferred to fill the time slot. Primetime can be extended or truncated if coverage of sporting events run past their allotted end time. Since the Heidi Game incident in 1968, in which NBC cut away on the East Coast from a New York Jets-Oakland Raiders football game in its final minute of play in order to show a movie, the National Football League began to mandate that all games be broadcast in their entirety. Due to this rule, game telecasts may sometimes overrun into the 7 p.m. Eastern Time hour. Fox previously scheduled repeats of its animated series in the 7 o'clock hour, allowing themselves to simply preempt the reruns if a game ran long. This was later replaced by a half-hour-long wrap-up show, the OT. In contrast, CBS does not, as its weekly news magazine 60 Minutes has traditionally aired as close to 7 p.m. Eastern Time as possible. If a game runs long, 60 minutes is shown in its entirety at the conclusion of coverage, and the rest of the primetime schedule on the East Coast is shifted to compensate. For example, if game coverage were to end at 7:30 p.m., primetime would end at 11:30 p.m., however, in the rare case where the NFL game runs excessively late, an episode of a series scheduled for later in the evening may be preempted. In an extreme case, CBS's primetime can be extended past midnight during broadcasts of the NCAA Division I men's basketball tournament. This does not necessarily apply universally. In 2001, after an XFL game went into overtime, forcing the delay of a highly promoted episode of Saturday Night Live, NBC made a decision to cut off all future XFL broadcasts at 11 p.m. NBC backed out of the XFL after the end of that season, leading to its failure. Until the U.S. Federal Communications Commission regulated time slots prior to primetime with the now-defunct Primetime Access Rule in 1971 and 1972, networks began programming at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific/6:30 p.m. Central and Mountain on weeknights. The change helped instigate what is colloquially known as the rural purge in which rural-themed and older-skewing programs were disproportionately cancelled. In the 1987-1988 season, NBC-owned stations in several cities experimented with airing a schedule of syndicated first-run sitcoms at 7:30/6:30 p.m. to compete against syndicated reruns or game shows such as Wheel of Fortune on rival stations. The vast majority of primetime programming in English-speaking North America comes from the United States, with only a limited amount produced in Canada. The Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission mandates quotas for Canadian content in prime time. These quotas indicate at least half of Canadian primetime programs must be Canadian in origin, but the majority of this is served by national and local news or localized entertainment gossip shows such as Global's ET Canada and CTV's eTalk. Likewise, the vast majority of Spanish-language programming in North America comes from Mexico. Televisa, a Mexican network, provides the majority of programming to the dominant U.S.-based Spanish broadcaster, Univision. Univision does produce a fairly large amount of unscripted Spanish-language programming, the best known being the long-running variety show Sábado Gigante, hosted and created by Chilean national Don Francisco. Univision's distant second-place competitor, Telemundo, produces a much greater share of in-house content, including a long line of telenovelas. In Quebec, the largest francophone area of North America, French-language programming consists of originally produced programs and French-language dubs of English-language programs. Oceania, primetime in Australia is officially from 6 p.m. to midnight, following Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the highest ratings normally achieved between 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Primetime in New Zealand is considered to be 7:30 to 10:30 p.m., but can be extended to cover the entire evening of television. Latin America, in a great part of Latin American countries, prime time is considered to be from 6:00 or 7 p.m. to 10:00 or 11 p.m. The time slot is usually used for news, telenovelas and television series, and special time slots are used for reality shows, with great popularity, especially in Mexico and Brazil. In Mexico, prime time is known as Horario Estelar. In Brazil, it is called Horario Nobre, which is the time the three most famous telenovelas in the country are shown each weekday and on Saturdays. There are also news programs, reality shows, and sitcoms. Argentina In Argentina, prime time is considered to be from 8:00 p.m. until 12:00 a.m. With the most successful series and telenovelas in the country, and entertainment shows, like CQC. Chile In Chile, prime time is considered to be from 10:30 p.m. until 01:00 a.m. With the most successful series and telenovelas in the country. Investigation entertainment shows also air. See also, drive time television, international broadcasting, late-night television, market share, graveyard slot, the first 5 years of NBC comedy show, Saturday Night Live, The complete directory to primetime network and cable TV shows 1946 a Euro present, list of long-running primetime series. References